Okay, we're now working on Cinderella's bodice. This here. I'm using Simplicity pattern 1026. Apart from having a extra seam at the front here, most of the back pieces weren't too bad, but just needed some alteration. As you can see here, the pattern comes with 6 pieces from front to back, and we only need 5 for each side. Okay, so what I did is I used the original pieces and I did a full mock-up in some cotton. As you can see, the seam on the side here is correct, although it did require bending in a bit later on. We don't need this seam here, so that had to be taken out, which I'll show you in a moment. Okay, so now I've detached that centre part. This would have been the side seam, and this is the front seam. You then take this piece and you draw a completely new pattern piece, so you just basically draw around the outside and that will give you a new piece without the seam down the middle here. Okay, this is a piece altered from later on, so you can obviously see it's a bit shorter in length compared to this piece here. Basically it's got the same curve. You can probably see it on the floor a bit better here. So you've got your shape coming out towards the bottom, and then you've got your side seam. So this is the same shape as this, but without the seam going down here, so you've now got rid of that. Okay, the next thing we have to do is to take the centre back piece and the piece that goes onto that, which is called the middle back, and as you can see from the original pieces here, it's only angled with a very slight curve to it. What we needed to do, because the back has to go over a slight bustle and that is under your hoop to create that slight arc at the back, you need to measure where your waist is by doing another mock-up and flare it out at the waist. So I've brought it out, as you can see here if you just follow my finger, and you need to do the same on both sides. If you take this particular picture for example, you can see here that the extra flare to allow it to spread over the back and outwards like it does is put into this seam here. Also, because of the overlap, this pattern is designed to have a zip in it, so it's just got a straight edge all the way down to bottom. What you need to do is to cut it like this, so it's no longer looks like the original piece. And at the top here there's 2 things we could have done. We could have angled it up the other way, so when the overlap comes on it's similar to the way that you've got it here at the bottom, so it would just line up with that if you cut it at an angle, or we could bring it out straight, but as there's a butterfly in the way we cannot see what's going on underneath, so we've decided to bring it out straight there for an overlap at the top. Okay, so you can see now that our pieces are forming, And on the back pieces here you've got that extra flare seam there, that where you need to have it. Also at this point I've been making notes of how much more to add. I noticed on Lee James's that she has quite a low armhole, but I didn't feel too comfortable with having the armhole that low, so I'm going to be adding an extra 2 centimetres on the length at the top all the way around. Plus you will also lose 1.5 centimetres of that when you come to line it later, so bear that in mind. The other thing to do is to incorporate a strap next, or at least part of a strap. And this tissue paper here is the alterations with the extra 2 centimetres added, and we've also put a bit more of a curve on that because it didn't have a very good curve before. On this middle back piece you can see just here, this is where the original piece ended. We needed to bring that up a bit, just a bit more under my arm. So we've just put a piece of fabric on the back there and just pinned it on. Mum drew this around me when she put it on me. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to have part of the strap come out here, and this back piece here, this middle back section, is the start of where your next strap will be. These at this stage are just a little bit short because we've got to include a bit of seam allowance on that. In the middle here will be an elasticated insert which will allow better arm movement if you wish to dance like she does in the film. If you were to do a full strap, it would be very restricting and it would be very hard to try and even lift your arm further than halfway. You only need to make a Claudia gown to realise that. Okay, right. Okay, this is now the 3rd or 4th mock-up. I've lost track now. But this is the best mock-up. These will be my final pattern pieces. So there we go, we have the seams down the front there where we need them. We disregarded that other seam earlier, which we don't need. Also marked on here my waist. I'm going to transfer those measurements to my pattern pieces, because the crucial points here, especially on the side seam and this middle back seam where you want it to flare out, you want it to flare on from the waist. So doing a fitting and making sure that you've got a mark for where your waist is will help it fit better. And then of course up here we've got these straps. Now this has just been temporarily pinned on when I do the fittings, but basically this will be a piece of elastic. Just temporarily pinned it on the dressmaking dummy Betty, just to give you a quick look. And then you can see around the back here where the issues start to happen, in which it needs to flare out over a bum bag which is underneath the hoop. And this is why you need to start flaring that seam out there. And then this is also why you've cut the bottom of the back like that instead of coming straight across. And now it will overlap like that, lining up with the edge. So what I'll need to do now is take half of it apart and draw out some new paper pattern pieces, and this should be my final pattern pieces to use for my bodice. Okay, so these should be the pattern pieces you end up with, these are the ones that are made to fit me. Go starting from centre front to centre back. Next you need some blue cotton of your choosing. I've chosen a very thin, very fine cotton here. It was a pale sky blue and I wasn't happy with how pale it was, so I dyed it a bit darker. So it's more like a deep sky blue now. Next I need to mount my cotton fabric onto some crystal organza. I've got this organza in a very pale blue. There are different types of crystal organza you can get. This one's quite thin, quite sheer and sparkles a lot, and there are others that are a bit thicker, have more of a sheen and a glitter to them. I've gone for one that's a bit more glittery. I've laid it flat on the table here. Next you want to start laying your pattern pieces down. Just remember you need opposites. So here I've got my two side front sections. You need one facing one way, one facing the other. Remember to do that for all of your pieces. Next thing I'm going to do is just lightly pin the cotton edge to the organza. I'll do that for all my pieces. When cutting your piece out, remember to leave at least 2 to 3 centimetres around the edge. And to keep it as flat as you possibly can. Next you want to start tacking, doing large tacks, your organza to your fabric, still keeping some of the pins in. You can either go really close to the edge or you can come in a fair bit. Just try not to tack where you're going to sew your seam. You will do that for all of your pieces. Moving aside from the other pieces for now, I've made up my liner here, which is made out of a thicker cotton, a bit stronger, a bit stiffer, and I've been marking out all my boning channels. I've made them 16mm wide because the boning is 10mm, 1 centimetre wide. So you need your channels to be a bit wider for the boning to slot into. I bought some blue bias binding in the 16mm wide. And I'm just going to go ahead now and sew on all my channels. Sew on all your bias binding strips, remembering to leave at least 2 centimetres on the top and 2 to 2.5 centimetres at the bottom for lining and doing your piping later on. And also remember to test that your wiring is going to go through your channels easily before you go any further. Next I'm going to use that same gloss grain ribbon that I've used on to make the hoop, and I'm going to make myself a waist tape. This is so that it will help keep the bodice in place while you move. I've made mine about 10 centimetres longer each side, but that may need cutting down a bit later on. Next you need to anchor your waist tape in place, being careful not to go over your channels. I've done this on the machine, but you can do it by hand. Just do a few stitches forwards and backwards, top and bottom of the ribbon. So say don't go over your channels because you need your boning to go through there. Remember to have your flaps pointing outwards as well. Just remember this has to go more or less where your waist is. take your outer fabric pieces and sew those all together the same way. Remember, you're matching up blue to blue, don't match up the organza because that's been made longer anyway. We'll trim that in a minute. Then along the top I've just machine run a long stitch across the top just to hold that in place. Next you need to take your liner and your outer bodice and start lining it. First of all, you needed to have pinned them together, making sure that your seams all match up, and then we've just tacked it in some green thread around the top to hold it in place, and then I've machine sewed it starting from the back all the way up along the top to the end of the straps, and then started on the other side of the strap, around the armhole, and so on, all the way round and back down to the other side. Make sure that your organza is facing upwards, otherwise when you come to turn it the right side out, it will be on the inside. So just watch that when you come to line it. Okay, now you need to start reducing the bulk around the edge. So start at the ends by clipping in at the angle you can see here, and then just cut down all the way around, being careful not to go through the stitching line where you've lined it, and then clip into your curves around the armhole. Don't go through the seams. And then just here I've clipped as well as a slight bend before the strap. Do that all the way around. Next we need to start turning it the right side out. Next we're going to press the edges with the iron. This has to be done very carefully, and obviously you've got your organza underneath, so you need it on the cool setting. Otherwise you'll be starting all over again. No, seriously, just be careful and give it a good press around the edges, making sure your liner does not roll to the outside, although this can be quite tricky around the armhole. Okay, now I'm going to make some elasticated straps, go in between the half straps I've got here. It might be helpful if somebody took a measurement for you around your arm. I've made mine 6 centimetres wide by 14 centimetres long. And here I have my elastic. Okay, next fold each section in half, and 2 centimetres from the folded edge, run a sewing line. Next, trim some of the excess down and turn them the right way out. Next, thread your elastic through the tube using a safety pin at the end to pull it through, and then on your machine make sure your elastic just comes to the end here and a few millimetres in, just so forwards and backwards. I've done it about 3 times so it really holds it there. At the moment your strap should look like this. What you want to do is take the ends and poke them in towards the centre so they look a bit like that. So poke them down a good ½ centimetre inside so you've got a nice neat edge. Next, take your elastic and push it into that little hole about 1 centimetre in. Put a pin in place once you've sandwiched it inside to hold it, because you're going to just machine sew it across now.
Okay, when this bodice was on Tracy, I know that the gap between the front and the back strap was 8 centimetres. But what I'm going to do now is pull the elastic and reduce this length down to about 6 centimetres, and then we're going to cut it and sew a line across to hold it in place. Okay, I want this to be approximately 6 centimetres, which is about right. Then what I'm going to do then is, while I have it in the right position and making sure that your elastic is still tight, is that we're going to put 2 or 3 rows of stitching across there to hold it in place so it doesn't move.
Just repeat the same process on the other strap. We've now cut the elastic off and we're going to insert it into the other side. And then just sew it in place as you did before.